and the state leaders. There was no real transfer of wealth or political power or any of those things, or social power. Slaves remained slaves for the most part, those sorts of things. But there really was a change. It didn't break out all at once, but it began the kernel of a change that society had to become more egalitarian, that political power had to be dispersed among all the people. And it's, of course, been a alarmingly slow process to spread that, the voting power and other things out to some groups. But it did begin almost at the very beginning. People think, oh, well, white males could vote. Well, no, white males couldn't vote early on. There were very strict property requirements that meant you had to be quite wealthy to vote when the country first started. And getting rid of those property requirements was one of the first big voting rights movements in this country. And then, of course, abolition and freeing slaves and all that came out of the ideals that were popularized by the revolution. Had we not had that revolution, the spread of those ideals would have probably gone in a very different way.
That's a very good point. I talked with a professor who looked at utopian communities in America, where you'd have these towns that would try to live in communism or not use draft animals or other experiments. And it seems goofy, but a lot of the reason they did that, mostly in the early to mid 1800s, is because the Revolutionary War, against all reasonable expectation, it succeeds. And you have a nation that is using democracy, and they consciously refer to ancient Athens and other practices. And intellectuals in Europe are scratching their heads thinking, this thing from 2,000 years ago in ancient Athens, people are basing a government on that, and it's succeeding. I mean, is someone else going to come along and base a government on the military warrior culture of the Spartans? I mean, what's next? So it made utopian communities think, hey, let's dust off those history books and see what else we can pull out from antiquity and give it a go. Hey, anything is possible. And a lot of those communities did not work. It's part of the glorious laboratory of government in the United States, and I recommend checking that out. But yeah, that is true. It could be very interesting and revolutionary for people to take it. So is that something that you see as being the great legacy of the Revolutionary War, that I mean, this is what imprinted the United States with this DNA that informed the ideology that would lead to the Civil War and other conflicts?
And not only that, yes to that, but also it spread the idea throughout the world. I don't think we would have had a French Revolution without the American Revolution. I don't think we would have seen democracy spread throughout Europe and many other places without the American Revolution. I mean, we have to remember that prior to the American Revolution, almost everywhere in the world was governed by a monarch. Some were absolute monarchs, some were limited monarchs, but they were all monarchs. The idea of a republic, of an elected government, was a fundamental change in the way the world looked at government, and it all began in America, and it's really spread all over the world.
Well, there is a lot more to cover here, and you have over 6 dozen episodes on this topic, and your catalog is growing. So, Michael, thank you for discussing all this with us. If people want to learn more about you and your podcast, where is the best place to find you online?
I have a website which will lead you to both my podcasts, and I also have a written blog if you like reading rather than listening. If you go to www.amrevpodcast.com, you can have access to all of that stuff.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes, and people can check it out there. Michael, thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, that is the episode for today, and I really appreciate you listening, because it's you, the audience, that makes this show happen. And it's also you, the audience, that grows this show. First of all, I'd like to thank the Knowlton's Rangers, and especially our spy masters, Baron Fraser, Carl from Norway, Chris from Maine, Moondoggy from Ohio, and Rick Knowlton, and I'll explain what that means in a second. If you would like to help support this show and help it reach new listeners who haven't discovered it yet, there's 4 easy ways for you to do it. First, subscribe to the show and leave us a review on the listening app of your choice. If you want to do that, you can go to historyunpluggedpodcast.com. 2, like us on Facebook and share posts about new episodes. 3, check out sponsors for the show. This is the best way to help me pay the bills, because if sponsors see the audience is interested in their products, they will keep advertising. 4, you can become a member of the Knowlton's Rangers. The Knowlton's Rangers were an elite reconnaissance and espionage detachment of the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the History Unplugged membership program. Learn how to join by going to patreon.com/unplugged. So here's what you get if you become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you join at the level of Scout, you can get early access to new podcast episodes, along with enjoying absolutely every single episode of the History Unplugged podcast ad-free. All 270 and counting episodes. If you join at the level of Intelligence Officer, you can also get access to premium episodes, like a multi-part series on the life of Audie Murphy, the most decorated combat soldier in World War II, or the 10-part series Ottoman Lives, a series that looks at the cast of characters that made up the Ottoman Empire, such as the Sultan, the eunuch, the harem servant girl, and the soldier. And finally, if you join at the level of Spy Master, you get all the same stuff as the scouts and intelligence officers, but you also get a shout-out to you and or your business at the end of each episode, a 3-pack of hardcover history books, plus you'll be put at the very front of the line for me to answer your question about history, and I can guarantee I will dedicate an episode that's about an hour long or so to your question. Sign up at patreon.com/unplugged. Again, that's patreon.com/unplugged. Anyway, those are the ways you can help out the show. Thank you so much for your support. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get your daily dose of all things history related, from ancient Greece to the Cold War. We'll see you next time at the History Unplugged podcast.